oh my God, like this is the first time I'm in a recovery setting where like I'm not a problem. I'm just a person and I have every worth and right to a good life as the person who walked in behind me. He said, yeah, we get together, we climb, we go on hikes, and there's group fitness classes. And then on the weekends when there's not Phoenix programming, like we're still hanging out, going climbing together, camping. We help our kids with our homework. We live. We live. And I was like, okay, like maybe just maybe the next 70 years isn't going to be me hanging on for some reason I can't understand.
Stories are powerful.
Welcome to the Rise, Recover, Live podcast, brought to you by The Phoenix. This is a space where people impacted by substance use can come to share their story of strength and resilience, get open and honest, and inspire hope and build community through shared experience.
We'll be talking to people in our community on their own recovery journey and shine a light on the topic of recovery in all its forms. Maybe you'll hear some of your story in theirs.
Let's show the world that together we rise, recover, and live.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Rise, Recover, Live podcast. We are your hosts, Bryce III.
Liz McKean.
And we are totally synced up every time we do the intro now. I thank everybody listening who sent in those recommendations to show up and allow for inclusivity in the intro and get us straight. I love the process of this being our podcast. So if you have any other suggestions or anything like that, please shoot those in.
Heck yeah.
Do you want to speak to how they can shoot those in and what they can do to help elevate this podcast before you get jumped off, Liz?
Yeah, definitely. So it's been really cool to see that this podcast community is growing, and we've been hearing from a lot of folks in a lot of different mediums that it's been meaningful, and I can't tell you how much it warms our hearts when we hear that from you all. So thank you so much for being part of what we're doing, because we certainly couldn't do without you. And if this has been meaningful to you, one way that you can help us to find more people to enjoy the show is to leave us a rating and review. You can rate on pretty much any podcast app. If you're on Apple Podcasts in particular, leaving an actual review in words is really helpful. And of course, just sending this podcast out to friends and family is an incredible way to get the word out. So thank you so much for everyone who's done that and helps us so much to get it out.
Oh, yeah. I was just checking the stats the other day, and on Spotify, we have 27 five-star reviews.
That's amazing.
On Apple Podcasts, we got 5, but I really appreciate those 5. And if I had those 5 in a room, I'd buy you all coffee.
Actually, I think we have 20-something review or ratings. I think it's the reviews that we just have a handful of written out.
Yeah,
so.
And you don't got to write us a paragraph and not be like, you all are so cool, or you all suck, or whatever. Or just give us some stars, whatever, right? But before we get into it, Liz, how's your energy?
Oh my gosh, my energy is fantastic because you are my sunshine today. How about yours?
The wind beneath your wings and the sunshine. And man, you know how to make somebody feel special, Liz. That's wonderful.
Well, you are special.
So who do we have here today?
We'll talk about special. We have an incredibly special person here today. Her name is Kaley Jones, and she is a part of the Phoenix community out in Colorado Springs. Actually, similar to me, started out as a team member and was a volunteer, and now actually works for the Phoenix and has a recovery story that I'm really excited to hear and to share today. So welcome, Kaley. Thanks so much for being here. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to join y'all. I just you both radiate such joy, and being in your presence, even virtually, just feels like my whole soul is landing. So thank you for the invitation. And yeah, I'm doing good. I'm really excited to share a little bit about what my experience has been and how Phoenix has shaped my recovery, and now how I have the absolute privilege to offer it to my community. So
amazing.
Man, you both know how to make somebody feel special. I'm super excited to just continue this conversation. I feel like a beam of light right now. I'm really radiating.
There you are.
But I think, so I was looking at the submission form that you sent in, and your story has taken you to a lot of different places.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be excited to hold space for any one of those stories. And from what I read, this could be a 3-part episode. So I think what I want to just, I want to set the stage and create the space for you to share whatever's on your heart today. whatever's at the forefront, and just know that this is a safe space to share it. Start where you want to start.
Yeah, man, I think there's a lot of things, like when I think about what's on my heart today, there's a lot of different facets, because the reality is like the human experience is multifaceted and so complex, and trying to say that like, oh, being a mother in recovery is on my heart is also like coexisting with, I'm really fired up about restorative justice work right now. And those things are significantly intertwined for me as a result of my experience in recovery. So I don't know that I have like a clear step forward of how we start our conversation or what story I want to highlight, because I think they all are intertwined, and interests and passions come as a result of each step that I have taken on my journey before recovery, during recovery, and what's coming in my future. So I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but those are probably the two biggest things. And I'm sure a lot of folks are like, what do you mean restorative justice? And
I'm a lot of folks. I was about to ask you that.
Right? Those don't seem totally overlapped. But the reality is my story began when I started drinking and using at 19 years old. At that time, wanting nothing more to be a mother, but knowing that there was no way that I was ever going to achieve that honor, that privilege, that rite of passage, right? I couldn't stay sober. And so throwing my hands up and just saying, I probably am not going to live to be 22. And I'm fine with that, because I don't know how else to live. Like, I don't know how to survive this intolerable existence that I have found myself in. And so criminal life made a lot of sense. And now, I get to move through that story and be the mother and come back to those individuals who have felt that way, like a criminal experience was really the only option available to them, and offer Phoenix. So maybe we could find a place to start there.
Yeah. That's, my gosh, what a beautiful way to integrate those two things that could feel really different. One thing that I feel like we don't always go into, that I would love to hear from you, just because you are an incredibly eloquent speaker, and I just feel like you're going to say something that's going to be the thing that I say that is going to be my answer to this question in the future. But how do you define recovery? Like, what does recovery mean to you, just as a word?
There again is like no one definition, because it's so personal. So my recovery is really honed in on this belief that I can operate in and thrive inside of a community that knows who I am, even when I'm not sure what my footing looks like. So it isn't like abstinence. It isn't, all these different stigmatized terms that we have for what recovery looks like. It's not perfect sobriety. For me, I choose abstinence based, but more so than not drinking or using mind altering substances. I look at recovery as like, where's my barometer of joy in relation to the community that I have invested my time and love in, and allowed them to also invest that in me, which for me is typically the hard part. I don't know how to accept love always. And so recovery is the whole experience of giving and receiving in a community that upholds and honors my authentic self as it is developing, understanding that it'll grow and change the more that I mature in my recovery and just as a human.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's,
yeah.
I love that.
I could 100% agree with that. Like, there's been multiple stages of my recovery where it's like, I've needed certain language, I've needed certain rhetoric, and then you go to the next season and some of that rhetoric falls off because it no longer resonates with my spirit. And there's always been community in relation to where it is that I've showed up in that point in time. And sometimes that community, there's a churn in that community, and then there's some continuity between all of those seasons where there's like, oh, this community is stuck with me throughout my entire experience in recovery. And I think that's a beautiful definition in the way that it allows for the continuous evolution of how it is that we show up, and the compassion that's required to allow for that evolution, I feel, is a big role in my personal recovery, where it's like, when I don't show up how I used to show up, it's like, if I've identified, well, this is how I show up, and then now I'm showing up differently, that identification is beginning to be broken. And so now it's like, I'm a fake, I'm a phony. It's like, no, you're evolving, you're blossoming. You're not who you once was, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's so, like, recovery is not the end of the journey. I think sometimes it's almost framed that way, where it's like you work so hard to get sober or to find recovery, and then it's like, made it, woo, done, and it's like, oh shoot, it's actually the only the beginning, and being kind of aware of that is a real gift. So yeah.
I got sober when I was 19. That was my 19th birthday. Gift from my family was an intervention to go into inpatient treatment, which I was like, I wanted a car. By the grace of God, I took that opportunity. And I remember just vividly thinking, like, well, I'm going to get sober at 19 and then spend the next 70 years of my life in a basement smoking cigarettes, talking about how much I messed up my life. Like, no, thank you. Like, I didn't understand that stepping into sobriety would be really stepping into like the fullest form of my human experience. I had no idea those things correlated, because that's not how sobriety was ever like, posed to me. And now, like, I get to like look at that full range of experience, that full like shedding of what served me when I was 19 years sober, 19 years old, isn't necessarily serving me at 31. Like, I'll never forget, I walked into my first 12-step meeting, and an individual asked me how old I was, and I said, oh, I'm 19. And they're like, oh, I've spilt more beer than you drank. And I'm like, well, I'm sure you did, but here we are, right? Like, the reality is like, that was super helpful for me in the beginning to understand that I had an opportunity to reclaim a life that I thought I wasn't worthy of, and avoid being a 60-year-old individual having drank more than another person ever even spilled. You know what I mean? So I got to have that kind of quick, immediate look, stand back of like, I can avoid many, many years of suffering. But now when I look at my recovery, I don't necessarily look at what am I avoiding, but instead, what am I leaning into? What is this like flow of life offering me? Every person that comes in contact with me through Phoenix, or, a line at the grocery store, and they see me with a baby on my hip and a sober shirt, and they're like, what is this chick doing? I get to have that full experience of like, they're here bringing me a lesson about what I can achieve rather than what I'm trying to avoid. So recovery has turned into be less about avoidance and more about leaning in.
It's incredible. I heard, these are not my words, but I heard recently somebody talk about recovery as just this giant leap of faith, believing that there is a version of me who can live without the thing that this version of me can't live without. And I think, community and connection, all the things that we talk about at the Phoenix and in many recovery spaces is so, that's how you find that evidence that there could be a version of you that could do that. And, learning from the people that are around you. And to be able to do that and recognize that as young as you were, like, that's incredible. Were you pretty convinced, like, at that point that, this was going to be a life that you were going to step into, or did it take a little longer than that 19th birthday present and first 12-step meeting?
Not at all. No. I think at the end of my drinking and using, I'd been doing a significant amount of trafficking for our local cartel, and I had a one-way ticket in my hand to go to Mexico to meet my dealer's mother. And 18 years old, was going to like live the dream on a beach in Mexico, bagging drugs. And it made so much sense to me at the time of like, this is what everyone wants, right? Like, they want such freedom to drink and use and not have to worry about money and be on a beach. Like, yeah, let's do that. And my mom had started to get calls from friends of mine who had overdosed and died, their parents calling. The guy that I'd been dating had been arrested. It was just like, all the things culminated to where my mom started to look at this, young woman who had a 3.98 GPA and held a part-time job at an Alzheimer's care unit, and say like, she's holding it together on the outside, but something's not right. Something is not right. And she searched my room, and she found all of my rigs and spoons and everything that I was using to be an intravenous heroin user. And my mom had never found like cigarettes or beer bottles. Like, she just went straight to like finding hardcore paraphernalia. And so when they staged that intervention, I was really like, I will never forget telling my mother, maybe if you would just use some heroin and calm down, everyone would have a much better time. This isn't a big deal. Because I was so far from reality. I had no idea how much danger I was in with the people that I was dealing with. I had no reference for real care for my like physical body or my spiritual or mental health. Like it just, I was robbed of that as a result of like the using and the trauma that was ensued as a result of that use. And so during my intervention, my family and loved ones and, my boyfriend's mother, my therapist, all read these letters to me about how I was going to die and I was throwing my life away. And the whole time I was like angrily licking my ice cream cone at them. It was my birthday, so I had ice cream. So I'm like angrily licking my cone at them. They should know how angry I am about them trying to help
You are ruining my birthday party, everybody.
Exactly. And the lady that cleaned my mom's house since I was like 7 years old came up and she put her hand on my knee and she said, "Mija, you're gonna die." And I believed her. I don't know why. I didn't believe anybody else, but I believed her. So I freaked out and I ran out of the house as fast as I could and like chain smoking a pack of cigarettes, sitting on a rock. And I had a plan, right? Like I was making a lot of money dealing these drugs. So I was like, okay, like they can kick me out. They can take my car. I'll get a burner phone. I'll get a burner car from people I'm dealing with. I can couch surf for a little while. Worst comes to worst, I'm like not the most unattractive person. I could probably walk the streets of South Nevada and like make a little cash doing favors for people that are unscrupulous. I had my plan. I was like, I'm actively choosing this lifestyle. This is like, I want to be using. I cannot stand that feeling of just like a raw, exposed nerve when I'm sober. I just can't do it. So I ran back and like walked back inside, determined to tell them that they could shove it, and I'm not going. I looked at my mom and I said, "Okay, I'll go." And I like tried to like grab the words in the air and like shove them back in my mouth because I'm like, that's not what I meant. I don't want to go. She's like, "You haven't said it. We're going." And so I got on a plane the next morning. They tried to leave my room. They packed my bags and they admitted me to a psych ward for an 8-day detox before going into treatment. And I was in treatment for just over 9 months. And the first 3 months of it, I don't think I really spoke to anybody. I was like, I refused to go into the 12-step meetings. I would sit in the van outside the meeting, scream. But there was one meeting that was an outdoor meeting in California. I got sober at a treatment center called Sober College in LA. And they allowed you to sit outside and smoke. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll go to that meeting. That one I'll go to. And a woman they celebrate milestones in recovery monthly at those 12-step meetings. And she picked up 8 months. And I remember being like, you're effing lying. What did you do for 8 months? Are you kidding me? Like, what, you just went to your job and then went home and had a normal life? Like, you're not normal. You didn't end up here because you're normal. And so after the meeting, I approached her. I was like, that's kind of bold to like lie about your sobriety. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And she was like, you should call me. Here's my number. And she just like invited me in, right? She remembered what it felt like to be so new to recovery and so ingrained in this belief that it's not actually attainable. And she knew that feeling. And she said, like, come closer. I'll walk with you in this. So I kept going to that meeting and I met people and I talked to them and they all told me stories just like mine where they were like, I don't want to be sober. I didn't lose a house. I didn't lose custody of children. I didn't trash a credit score. I didn't have all of these factors, that would qualify me as a person having a drug and alcohol problem. But what I had was this internal bankruptcy that made me feel like I was completely now disqualified for any good life. And they told me otherwise. And so I think when my change came where I was like, I think maybe I want to be sober, is I was 4 months sober and one of my really good friends in the treatment center was asked to leave based on some of her behaviors. She called me that night and she had taken a bottle of Xanax and was drinking a bottle of wine and she overdosed while on the phone and wouldn't tell me where she was at. And when she was pronounced dead, I had a moment of, I drink and use like her. And if I don't do something, like I'm never going to get to be the mother I want to be. My sister had just had her second child. And I was like, I'm never going to be involved in that. I'm not going to get to do all the things that maybe just possibly I could do. I had 4 months of people telling me that if I did this life, I really might be able to achieve something that's meaningful to me. So when she passed away, I finally acknowledged, I think, just how far I had gone, not knowing. And so I became a little bit more serious, and I willingly went to these 12-step meetings, and I willingly participated in the therapy groups at my treatment center. I willingly started telling people what was going on, willingly talked about some of the traumas of my childhood, and slowly but surely, that change started to take place. And when I left treatment, I had 11 months sober. I was on fire for sobriety. I was just I'd been introduced to a Y12SR 12-step meeting, which is a form of yoga. And I was like, okay, these humans get it. They understand that I also, my body is holding this. It's not just my mind and my spirit. My body is holding this addiction. I need support in that area. So I loved them. And then we went rock climbing while I was in treatment. And I was like, there's something to this. So I was on fire for this start. But when I left treatment, I came back to Colorado Springs where I did all my drinking and using. And I came back to my mom's house and I was manically digging through the tiny little pocket and jeans. I'm like, there's got to be something stashed in my pencil case from my high school. I got to have stashed. Because I was just like, oh, how do I exist here? I don't know how to not be deeply enmeshed in this community of support and like-minded individuals. I don't know how to go to a movie theater and not do a line of cocaine off the toilet. I don't know how to I don't know how to do any of this outside of the confines of someone lockstep, arm in arm with me, facing what it feels like to be sober in a world that doesn't really acknowledge that as a positive attribute. And so I'm trying to get high. I'm calling all the people. I called my dealer and he was like, you need to be sober. Stop calling me.
Wow.
And I think there's something of value when you're dealing with a cartel member and they say you need to be sober. There's some real acknowledgement there, right? I have got to do something different. So I went to a 12-step meeting and a girl that I'd used was there. And I was like, okay, God, thank you. I sat down next to her and this dude walks into the room with a shirt that says sober in giant bright red letters. And I'm like, oh my God, you're in public. Take that off. What are you doing? It was so mortifying to me. But he had this sense of ease and confidence about him. He had this I'm really proud of what I have accomplished. This is not an easy thing to do. And I'm here doing it. And I love my life. And he sat down next to my friend and I was like, oh, Jesus, God, please don't talk to me. I was so uncomfortable because I was like, how can you be okay with being sober? Why are you all right with that? Because to me, it's such a moral feeling. And they'd asked me to go bowling with them after the meeting. And I was like, okay, but that's a public place.
But put a hoodie on or something, bro.
Can't do that. But I went bowling with them and he told me about the Phoenix. And he had been a team member and volunteering for almost a year. And he said, yeah, we get together and we climb. We go on hikes and there's group fitness classes. And then on the weekends when there's not Phoenix programming, we're still hanging out, going climbing together, camping. We help our kids with our homework. We live. We live. And I was like, okay, maybe just maybe the next 70 years isn't going to be me hanging on for some reason I can't understand, And I ended up going to my first Phoenix event and I walked into City Rock, which is a partner here in Colorado Springs, still is. They've been our partners for almost 13 years. The people at the gym, not associated with Phoenix, just staff out there living their life, being City Rock people. And they saw me and they're like, hey, are you here for the Phoenix? And I was like, oh God, here it is. They're going to be like, here's this junkie walking in here off the street, trying to get free climbing. And I was just waiting for that shoe to drop to say you're really not welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
We know what you did in your past and it's disqualifying you from access to our membership. I just felt that was going to be their response. And instead they said, we're so glad you're here. Come on in. Here's the equipment. The instructor will get you started I hope you have a great time. And I was like, oh my God, like this is the first time I'm in a recovery setting where like I'm not a problem. I'm just a person and I have every worth and right to a good life as the person who walked in behind me, you know? So naturally I became like super obsessed. I volunteered. I worked in banking and insurance. And then I came to Phoenix. So I volunteered like 480 hours a year.
Wow.
I did some data entry. I supported on triathlons. I welcomed people at events. It's also pertinent probably to say I became super obsessed with that man in the silver shirt. Ended up marrying him.
I was wondering.
Yeah. And then we had our first baby in 2020 together. He still works for the Phoenix in a much larger capacity as a regional manager. And I oversee, after all those years of volunteering, they're like, do you just want to like make this official? Maybe out of the banking insurance industry. Yes, thank you. So I became staff in 2017 and have done everything from helping them open new chapters to supporting talent acquisition to program design to prison partnership work. And a large portion of my career was in development. And then after having my son, they allowed me to have the greatest privilege of coming back to the chapter that saved my life and helping them scale across Colorado Springs. So that is what I'm doing now. I don't know if I would have used without Phoenix, but I know I wouldn't be living.
Man.
Yeah.
I don't know, Bryce. I feel like we could just end right here. There's nothing that I could say that would be that could top that. It's just the most beautiful story.
I think the editors definitely got to leave that moment in silence right there between Kaley finishing and you saying, man. Because so the way that I usually show up to this space is, I kind of, like I'm listening, like as a host, and we're breaking the fourth wall here. But I'm always kind of like, okay, how do I keep this thing rolling? How do I keep this conversation evolving? But I think really your story is so powerful. Like I wasn't doing anything but listening and feeling every emotional impact and relating in so many different ways. There's so many people who I've had experience with that have had pieces of your experience in their experience. There's so many pieces of my experience that are inside of your experience. And I think that's like your story and you coming on this podcast is one of the main motivations for having this platform.
Yeah.
Because we want to make it to where our stories are accessible. We're collecting this data and sharing it with everybody. So this is a way to create community because somebody heard everything that you just said and was like, oh, I am not alone in the way that I've been feeling. I'm not alone in the experience that I had. Oh, and if she is doing this now, then maybe there's some hope for me, and I'll pass it to Liz, but like when you said, you heard the woman with 8 months. I remember, and I'm coming up on 10 years in July. And I remember when I was in rehab and there was a guy and he was like, yeah, I had 1 year. First what attracted me to him was he was taking Xanax too, which is what like my drug of choice at that point in time was. But he was taking way more than I was. And he was doing it in a different way. I'm like, damn, like, okay. And then when he said, I've got a year, I'm like, yo, it wasn't disbelief. For me, it was like a superstar. It was like I was fanning. I was trying to get his autograph and his signature after the meeting. Like, can you, whatever they say something about sponsorship or whatever. I don't care. Can we just be in contact? Because like, that's what I want, but didn't know was available because I had no reference point. And that reference point I think is huge. Like you said, like you didn't even know that, going and hanging with the cartel and doing these things was abnormal. It was just your life, right? Because you had no other reference point. And I've got quite a few stories myself where it's like looking back in hindsight, like, I was cutting it close there. Like, what was I on? But, we didn't know because we didn't have a reference point. And so I think that's the beauty of community. Yeah. We allow for a new reference point. Yeah. I've got a guy that I've worked with, and I remember when he first came in, he was like, he was young, like he was about my age. I got sober at 24. He got sober probably around like 27. And, you seeing all these old heads. His path of recovery was 12-step. Seeing all these old heads and they talking and they, crashing cars and, suicide attempts and this and that. And he said it, he like, something bad gonna have to happen to me for me to want to stop, and he said it to the right person at the right time. And that person's response wasn't nothing crazy. It wasn't like magic or witchcraft. He just had said like, do you really want that? And the way that it resonated with him, from who it came from, allowed for that thing to click, to allow for a perspective shift. It's like, actually, I don't.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm in a good position to prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
And imagine how much I imagine how much of an advantage that is and how I can take advantage of that advantage. And then it was for him, it was a click. And then you see he started changing in the way that he showed up. Who knows who's going to say what or how we're going to hear what or where we're at in our lives, where we need to hear that from, who we need to hear it from. But I think the community is one of the biggest incubators for that potentiality.
Yeah.
And one of the best things that I've ever done in my life was to get around people who had what it was that I wanted.
I really believe in I love words, a big love of words, reading, writing, all the things. And over the years, I considered this concept of hope that we talk about all the time. We talk about sharing our stories from a position of hope, and we want to have hope. We want to cultivate hope. But for me, what hope really is just an acronym for hearing other people's experience. If I take that out of my day-to-day life, I take out the opportunity to hear other people's experiences, I've effectively removed hope. There is no way for me to just internally cultivate this pull into joy or pull into my authentic self. That doesn't come just from my pit of my stomach. It comes from hearing other people's experience. I have to be exposed to other individuals that reflect back to me what I am capable of and what I'm healing from. Because of my own mind, I don't get to just randomly come up with what's going on for the world and how I relate to it without having that reflected back to me and having my opportunity to reflect it to the world as well. So I think you're absolutely right that part of our responsibility in sobriety is to hear other people's experience and share ours so that it can be heard. Because that's the only way we can really identify what it is that is tying us to these habitually painful experiences.
Yeah. It's like, I think you even referred to it in this way. It's just evidence, over and over again that there is another way. And then that very convincing voice inside of you that's saying this is the only way has another voice to say, actually, here's another way. And it's not the only voice that you're hearing. And I think, folks who are so generous to share in the way that, people do on this podcast and the way that you just did, it's special in so many ways. And I think one that really stands out for me, and the reason that this particular community is the one that I've been the most excited and proud to be part of, and that I credit with a lot of my ability to stay sober these years, is that those stories come with just nothing but just love and compassion and the freedom to do with it what you will. It's an outstretched hand. It's not a grabbing hand. It's very much like this is my story, and I offer it to you. In just complete love and openness, and come and walk beside me, as opposed to something that's more demanding. There's definitely times in our lives, I think, particularly in the throes of substance use disorder, that sometimes we do need somebody to be like, no, do this now. I'm going to actually tell you what to do because you've lost the ability to do it for yourself safely. But so much of this recovery journey is just those outstretched hands, and you get to choose to take a step in that direction, look towards, an alternate way of doing things. And that is just the freedom that life is, that we just cannot even imagine being a true thing when we're stuck in that space.
Like you were saying, Bryce, we get to prevent those catastrophic moment in time that requires sobriety, because you either have the loss of a house, children, life, whatever the case may be, where someone says something really terrible is going to have to happen to me in order for me to change, right? I think when we get to interrupt that by sharing these experiences, by, me not getting on that plane on a one-way ticket to Mexico, completely prevented a whole life of criminal involvement. And when we kind of talked at the beginning about this theme of like restorative justice, actually like mirroring parenting and recovery and all those things, right? Because by doing this process, by doing the hope, the hearing other people's experience, the facing fear, in the safety and confines of a loving and supportive community, it disrupts this generational pattern we have of hurting people, and then becoming more hurt by a system that isolates them. When I think about like the full scope of what we're really doing here, yes, we're talking and we're sharing and we're enjoying, and I think in many ways that process heals the experiences that happen during drinking and using, but we're also like paving the platform for my son, who's now 2.5, that when it's his turn to experience life on life's terms, and there's nothing I can do to kiss that boo-boo anymore, he knows exactly the steps to take, right? So when we talk about individual recovery, what we're really talking about is like whole community reformation. A whole community is changed by one person getting sober, because now it's, my mother, my sister, my brother-in-law, my children, my child, my 4 nieces and nephews, and the ring continues, right? So it's not just my family nucleus. Now it's my friend's family, and it just continues. And I can now go back, although I was never incarcerated, I can walk into those areas and say like, this is Phoenix. Would you like to join us? You can do it in here, or you can do it out there with us, whatever your journey is. So then those individuals' families now are experiencing that same recovery. So if we can help one person raise their hand, accept the hand that reaches out, and empower them then to share, like that's how we're going to change all of this, not just recovery, but like how we talk about childhood trauma, how we talk about gang violence, how we talk about gun violence, how we talk about the right to reproduce. Like all of those things will change as we do this process that y'all have created the perfect space for. So thank you.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Mic drop. I think I want to. We're definitely going to invite you back, because like there's so much more I want to dig into, and we're closing up. But I definitely want to talk to you about that thing that you finally were able to step into, which is motherhood, and how sobriety recovery has informed that, and dig deeper into that. But I know that's a whole nother 2-hour conversation.
Oh, it's one of the
Yeah. So be looking out for the second invite to come. Okay. We're gonna have you back.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm also a labor and postpartum doula. So a lot of my time and energy is built into how do we prepare mothers who are needing recovery while pregnant to support their baby's recovery before it's born, and how those two beings are inextricably linked for recovery and the healing process starting before you're born. It exists, right? So I'm excited to share with you anything you want to hear about parenting and mothering, and how recovery really does change the world.
Yeah.
Next time.
So I've got two on deck for us. We're going to do the motherhood, and then we need to get one with you and that guy with that mortifying sober shirt that you just can't believe. I see a couple's podcast in the future if he's down. So,
there's going to be some really fun conversation about relationships and sobriety with people when both parties are in recovery and one's not, or vice versa. I think talking about the dynamic of how do you do relationships in the first place? How do you do them when sobriety's on the
It's so true. Yeah. No, I love that. There's so many areas we could go, and just I think what we've talked about here today is so beautiful, and all of what you said about finding that recovery before that terrible thing has happened. I think that's something that people don't hear enough. And then also, talking about your work with the criminal justice system, like knowing that sometimes those terrible things have happened, and then knowing that there still is this beautiful life that's on the other side of it. Like redemption is possible, and it's not too late. Those things are both true. And I know that I didn't know that, when I was in the throes of it. And thank you for so eloquently like laying that out and like showing folks that, as opposed to just telling them, because I think people need to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before we go, one final question. Looking back on 17, 18, 19-year-old Kaley, really going through it, trying to figure out her way, no reference point. What does Kaley today tell that Kaley from back then?
Oh man, that would be a long conversation, but I think that I hope that teenage Kaley would walk away knowing that it wasn't her fault and she didn't choose addiction. I didn't actively choose to kill myself over and over and over again. And that the love and adoration I have for her courage to continue trying is without measure.
Beautiful words.
Yeah.
Beautiful words. Well, thank you, Kaley, for coming to the podcast today. We appreciate you. And I look forward to having many more conversations with you.
It's been my privilege. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for being an amazing host.
Oh my gosh. Well, you made it easy, and we're so grateful. And we're so grateful for everyone who's listening. Thank you for joining us week after week. Again, if you are able to rate and review, that means so much to us. If you'd like to share this episode with someone who needs to hear these beautiful words, please do. And I know we mentioned the app early on, but Bryce, what do we got for them? How can they get hold of us?
Well, they can get a hold of us by booking a one-way flight to Mexico.
Please don't do that. Oh, no.
Hopping on the flight.
Oh, no.
No, what you can do is you can download the Phoenix app from either the Google Play Store or the App Store. And once you download that app, you get access to this community that we've been talking about throughout this episode. One of many communities in the world, but a community that I'm a part of and that I really appreciate being able to have access to. You get access to all the programs, internationally, as well as all the virtual programs, 50 plus programs every week. But you also get access to the community groups. And community groups are these little groups within the Phoenix app that are like specialized, right? So you got plants of the Phoenix, you got pets of the Phoenix, and you also got the Rise, Recover, Live podcast group. Pop into that Rise, Recover, Live podcast group and come say hi to me, Liz, Kaley, and all the other podcast guests, as well as come tell us what you like about this episode, what you like about the podcast, what you are not liking as much, and what we can do better to improve. This is our podcast, and we appreciate each and every one of you. So remember, go to the App Store, the Google Play Store, download the Phoenix app, hop on there, hop in the podcast community group, and come talk to us.
Yep, please do. And definitely subscribe so you don't miss another episode, because we're going to have Kaley on here again, and you won't want to miss those. And thank you again for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Catch you later.
So now you're excited. Bryce, Liz, how do I get involved with the Phoenix? Well, my friend, it is super simple. We actually have an app. Head over to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, or look in the show notes of this podcast, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, and go download the Phoenix app.
The Phoenix app makes it so easy to find classes that are near you, or to access our virtual class schedule where you can hop on from the comfort of your home. You can also join our groups and have a conversation with someone from the Phoenix community from anywhere in the world. Please make sure that you join the podcast group where you can connect with Bryce and I and other listeners. Everything that you need is in the show notes. You can also head to our website at www.thephoenix.org. And maybe while you're there, you click the volunteer tab and get even more involved.